Hey everyone, before we dive into today's mystery, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss out on our deep dives into the world's strangest phenomena. Alright, let's get into it. Imagine you're a diplomat, stationed in a foreign country, working late one night. Suddenly, you're hit by a piercing sound, an intense pressure in your head, and a wave of dizziness. It feels like you're being targeted by something you can't see or understand. This isn't a scene from a sci-fi movie. It's the real experience of dozens of US and Canadian officials, and it's come to be known as Havana syndrome. Our story begins in late 2016 in Havana, Cuba. American diplomats and their families started reporting a bizarre set of symptoms. They described hearing strange, high-pitched noises, often localized to specific parts of a room or even just their homes. These sounds were followed by debilitating physical effects: severe headaches, nausea, vertigo, hearing loss, and memory problems. Some even experienced what felt like a concussion, despite no physical impact. The initial cases were baffling. Doctors who examined the affected individuals found evidence of brain injury, similar to what you'd see after a crash or an explosion. But there was no crash, no bomb. The victims were just going about their daily lives. The US government was alarmed and evacuated many of its personnel from the embassy in Havana. The mystery had begun. What could be causing these strange and targeted attacks? The first theory that emerged was sonic weapons. The idea was that some kind of device was emitting powerful, focused sound waves to harm people. This seemed plausible, especially given the descriptions of piercing noises. The Associated Press even released a recording of the sound that some diplomats heard. It's a grating, high-frequency buzz that's incredibly unsettling to listen to. However, acoustics experts quickly pointed out a problem. To cause the kind of physical damage reported, a sonic weapon would have to be enormous and incredibly loud, to the point where everyone in the vicinity would hear it, not just the targeted individual. The sound would also have trouble penetrating walls effectively. So the sonic weapon theory, while popular, started to look less and less likely. Then a new suspect entered the picture: microwave energy. This theory suggests that the diplomats were targeted with beams of directed microwave radiation. Unlike sound, microwaves can be focused into a tight beam, can pass through walls, and could potentially cause the kinds of symptoms reported. An interesting piece of this puzzle is something called the Frey effect. Discovered back in the 1960s, it's the phenomenon where pulsed microwave radiation can be perceived as sound by the human brain. This could explain why victims heard noises that no one else could. The microwaves trick the brain into hearing a sound that is actually there in the form of acoustic waves. This theory gained a lot of traction, especially after a 2020 report by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. The report concluded that directed pulsed radio frequency energy, another term for microwaves, was the most plausible explanation for the symptoms. It fit the facts better than any other theory on the table. It explained the localized nature of the attacks, the ability to penetrate buildings, and the auditory sensations. But if it was microwaves, who was behind it? This is where the story gets even more complicated and enters the world of international espionage. Suspicion immediately fell on foreign adversaries. Cuba was the initial suspect, given that the first cases occurred there. The Cuban government, however, has always vehemently denied any involvement. They cooperated with investigations and even invited the FBI to Havana. They argued they had no motive to attack US diplomats and sour relations, just as they were beginning to improve. So, investigators started looking at other players. Another major suspect has long been Russia. It's no secret that Russia has a long history of sophisticated intelligence operations and has reportedly researched directed energy weapons for decades. Adding to this suspicion is the fact that similar incidents didn't just happen in Cuba. The Havana syndrome moniker is actually a bit misleading now. Cases have been reported all over the world, in China, Germany, Austria, Vietnam, and even in Washington, D.C. One of the most public incidents happened in 2021 near the White House, affecting a National Security Council official. This global pattern suggests an actor with a worldwide reach, which points the finger away from Cuba and more towards a major global power like Russia. However, there's a big problem with all of these theories: the lack of definitive proof. No weapon has ever been found. No government has claimed responsibility. Intelligence agencies have conducted extensive investigations, but the official conclusions remain frustratingly vague. In early 2023, a declassified U.S. intelligence community assessment concluded that it was very unlikely a foreign adversary was responsible for the incidents. They suggested that pre-existing medical conditions, conventional illnesses, and environmental factors could explain many of the cases. This conclusion was met with a lot of frustration and anger from the victims. Many feel abandoned and disbelieved. They argue that the sheer number of cases, the similarity of the symptoms, and the presence of intelligence officers among the victims cannot be a coincidence. How could over 100 trained professionals all suddenly develop the same rare collection of symptoms due to stress or the environment? For them, the idea of a coordinated attack is the only thing that makes sense. They point to the objective medical findings of brain injury as proof that something real and physical happened to them. So we're left with a deeply unsettling divide. On one side, you have hundreds of government employees who believe they were attacked by a secret weapon, with their lives and careers turned upside down. They are suffering from real, chronic health problems. On the other side, you have an intelligence community that, after years of investigation, says it can't find evidence of an attack or a weapon. This leads us to another, more psychological theory: mass psychogenic illness. This is when a group of people, often under stress, begin to experience similar physical symptoms without a clear medical cause. The idea is that the initial real reports from Havana created an atmosphere of fear and hypervigilance among diplomats worldwide. In this state of high alert, any normal ailment, a headache from stress, a dizzy spell from a virus, could be misinterpreted as an attack. The power of suggestion, fueled by intense media coverage and government warnings, could have caused the phenomenon to spread. But this theory is also highly controversial, and for the victims, deeply offensive. It implies their suffering is all in their heads, even when MRI scans and other tests show tangible physical changes. Critics of this theory argue that it conveniently dismisses a difficult problem without truly explaining the initial cluster of cases in Havana, where the symptoms were so specific and concentrated. So where does that leave us? The Havana Syndrome mystery is a perfect storm of medicine, technology, and geopolitics. We have three main possibilities, none of which are fully satisfying. 1. A foreign adversary has developed a new form of directed energy weapon and is using it against American officials, and our intelligence agencies either can't prove it or are covering up their inability to do so. 2. This is a case of mass psychogenic illness on a global scale, a powerful example of how fear and suggestion can manifest as real physical symptoms. Or 3. It's a combination of different factors, a few initial real attacks, followed by a wave of psychogenic cases, and some misdiagnosed conventional illnesses, all lumped together under one name. The truth is, we may never know for sure. The evidence is murky, the stakes are high, and every theory has its flaws. But what is undeniable is the human cost. Hundreds of people have had their health, careers, and lives profoundly impacted. They are caught in the middle of a mystery that sounds like science fiction, but has had very real consequences. This story serves as a chilling reminder that in the 21st century, the front lines of conflict may not be battlefields, but embassies, apartments, and even our own minds. The weapons of the future might not be loud and explosive, but silent and invisible. What do you think is the most likely explanation for Havana syndrome? A secret weapon, a psychological phenomenon, or something else entirely? Let me know your theories down in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you all think about this one. Thanks so much for watching, and if you found this mystery as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. We'll see you in the next video.